All right, we'll begin with a brief prayer to set sacred space. Righteous Almighty God, sacred creator of all that is, all that has been, and all that shall be, we call you into this space, decreeing and declaring that our hearts, our body, mind, soul, spirit be aligned, attuned, to be a one accord, decreeing and declaring that the righteous light of God enter into this space, purifying the layers of the mind, releasing all dense energies, negative emotions, all feelings of sadness, depression, anxiety, all feelings connected to overwhelm. Let them be alchemized and removed, decreeing and declaring that the righteous light of God be with us and expand in the heart space, purifying the heart, releasing any heaviness, any shadows within the heart, any shadows within our energy bodies, etheric layers. Let them be cleansed wholly and completely, decreeing and declaring that the righteous confidence within our spirit be expanded, that faith be expanded in today's session, opening up the righteous fields of wisdom, the righteous fields of revelation, so that everyone listening today and those listening in the future will receive what they need to receive, will receive clarity, inner revelation, inner clarity for their spiritual work, for their spiritual journey, decreeing and declaring that the righteous forces of God be with us, the righteous angelic forces, the righteous elemental and ancestral forces. Let them assist with bringing forth greater and higher understanding, greater clarity, opening the pathways of the mind, suppressions that have taken place in the past, oppressions that have taken place in the past that are still anchored in. Let them be removed, uplifted in this session today as we bring forth the teaching, the insight of spiritual authority. Let the doors and the pathways for each individual listening today be open and expanded to create a righteous pathway for their life, for their mission, for their purpose in this world. Decreeing and declaring that this space be anointed from the physical layer to the etheric layers to the layers of the internet online as we interface with each other today. That this be done as sure as the sun rises, as sure as the righteous laws of God exist. So it is, so it shall be. Amen. Amen and amen.
Amen. Right. Welcome everyone to today's session in the sanctuary. Today's topic is on the overall theme of spiritual authority. And we are starting this theme with spiritual authority. The title is Spiritual Authority, the Long Forgotten Protection Mechanism for the Spiritually Gifted. And for us, this is one of our favorite topics because it's not a topic that the spiritual awakening community is perhaps aware of, practices, engages with it. I think overall, the concept of spiritual authority and legalities, you will find those within religious systems, but not in spaces where maybe we are more flexible and open with our explorations. And the community that we have been engaging with, that we've been working with, are more of the more spiritual individual, spiritually inclined, the mystics, those who are questioning a lot and may feel more comfortable not necessarily engaging with that spirituality within a system, right? And so this is who we're talking to today, and we want to share this as a part of what we call our mapping and discernment training, right? And so that as you engage with your spiritual path, as you grow in your spiritual journey, you understand this concept and why it is important and how it adds overall to what you may call spiritual hygiene, spiritual protection, what we call holy combat. For us, this is a holy combat fundamental that if you are a person who is exploring the spiritual realm, you definitely need to know about this concept and why it matters. Right. So a contemplation question, as we usually do, that I want to invite you to today is this question. It's an abstract question, and you can think about it not just in this moment, but just beyond today's session. And that question is, do I actually have the right to do what I am doing in terms of spiritual practices, spiritual processes, even spiritual systems, right? So here is asking yourself, do I have this right to do that? And the big word here in this inquiry is that word right, right? And right here we're speaking the concept of birthright, but also legal right in the context and in the realm of divine laws, cosmic laws, right? Do I have the right to do this? Right? So this is not about your ability to do something or your desire to do something, but essentially the right to do it. And we are inviting you to that question because I don't think a lot of us ever think about that. Like, what do you mean, do I have the right? I am a free will being. I have the right to do anything that I want, right? Perhaps that's how you have approached your spiritual practices and spiritual exploration, that you can do anything you want whenever you want because you are a being who has been given divine free will. And in some regard, you are right in the sense of you are given free will to choose. But as usual, our invitation today is about bringing consciousness to the choices we're making, because sometimes we are making those choices without the awareness that we're making those choices, and that more than anything, the law of cause and effect. If I make this choice, I should be ready to receive the effect that comes from that. Right? And so spiritual authority is kind of entering that kind of framework and foundation, right? And what that framework is, it comes from that word authority, right? So we're answering, what is spiritual authority? The word authority is coming from the root word is author, right? And personally, I love that word author in the way that it exists, in whether we're speaking in the context of someone who writes and creates something, and also author in the concept overall. Author is our ability to create, to influence creation itself. And when you have authority, it means you have the right to create something within a specific space. And yeah, that's pretty much what authority is. Do you have the ability to create? Have you been granted that ability to create within a specific space? But creation here is not just about like I'm creating something new. We are overall speaking about engaging with creation itself on planet Earth, as well as on the spiritual counterparts of the earth itself, right? So when we're talking about spiritual authority is, do you have the ability to engage and to create and to influence creation at the level of the spirit, right? Your spirit as well as the spirit realm itself, right? So that is what spiritual authority is. And it's easy to kind of understand that in our world, we have been fighting for a long time about this question of who is the highest authority, who has the right to create. And so because this being force impulse has the right to create, then they are worthy of our to lead us, they're worthy of our reverence and devotion, our worship, right? It's actually connected to the authority that we believe they have. And in fact, when you think about spiritual systems around the world and why we have been fighting for a long time between religious specific religions, Abrahamic religions versus indigenous systems, and then denominations as they exist within these systems, everyone is fighting about the question of authority. And everyone kind of believes they have the authority, right? Essentially, the God that they decree in their religion is the right God, and the other ones aren't the right one. That's why we've been fighting for a long time in our wars, because we are asking what is the highest spiritual authority, because the being the force that has authority then has governance. They can govern how things can take place in our planet, right? And so for most people, the highest authority, we may never think about it, is we believe that the highest authority of our lives is the creator, God. And people have different names for that, right? But that is the highest authority that exists in our universe. But in the spiritual community that you might be part of, that is not as simple as for some people. When they say God, it's as simple as, oh yeah, okay, I get that. For some people, the concept of God is much more complex, and it can be a source of confusion, right? And so that's kind of like what we're bringing to the table, the need to purify and clarify what you mean and who your highest spiritual authority is. Because at some point, whether you're aware of it or not, you have agreed to who your highest authority is. Today, as you sit here, there is a force, a being that you have already decreed, and you live your life by that authority. You make the choices that you make, the decisions that you make based on that authority. And your spiritual life is actually deeply influenced by that authority, right? And so if this is such an important conversation, an important part of our relationship with the divine, why are we not having enough conversations about this foundational concept, right? So that's what we're talking about today. Last month, we were breaking down a whole lot of concepts about deception, spiritual deception, right? And for us, we see that deception is highly connected with authority, right? Essentially, when a being misrepresents itself and it gives itself the role of the highest authority in your life, and what that does in terms of your soul, the health and well-being of your soul and your spirit. Right. So this is why authority comes after deception, so that you can understand this is how you clean up if there's any deception that has been taking place, by getting very, very clear about the authority, about the impulse, the force, the beings, whether this is human beings or non-human beings, that have authority, influence on your life, on the choices you make, on what you are creating as part of your life, because you are co-creating. And we are co-creating with the divine laws. Yes, we're also creating with the reality of our realm, the nature of our realm. Yes, F. But we're also co-creating in a very interesting way with the authorities in our lives, right? And so this is what spiritual authority is about, and we will be breaking that down. Yeah.
Okay. So we're starting with the core work of this, which is about the four offices of spiritual authority. So in this four office, we have the authority of your own soul and spirit. These are the powers that you have within yourself, the abilities and skills that give you the right, the jurisdiction to certain things. If you have any gifts, an example would be a gift of teaching. You have a gift of organization, gift of being able to manage your money. You have the authority to speak to the collective. if you believe you have the authority to be an initiator, but that is not an actual gift of yours, you are typically overstepping, and by virtue of that, you have transgressed against the natural law, the natural order, and to a degree, you have lost your protection. So the power that is within your soul and your spirit, the things that you are drawn to just by being a human, the desires you have, they are usually synchronized. If you're on the true path of your spirit and your soul, they're synchronized with your spirit and your soul. Being drawn to be in front of people, to lead people, to manage people, could be connected to a gift that you have, a voice or a word to bring forth words of encouragement to certain collective groups. That is a authority that over time you have cultivated by way of what is in your spirit, and you align with what is in your spirit in your human self to where you maybe take certain classes that deal with presentations. You enter into a career field that deals with talking or speaking to individuals, maybe motivational speaking, possibly even pastoral work or apostolic doctrines, whatever that may be the fine details of, there is still a general authority that is being cultivated to where you feel qualified from a physical lens to a certain degree to speak to people, or maybe qualified to advise mothers on their children by way of the experiences you have. That's another example. This authority is something that is tangible. It's also something that, as I said at the beginning, that you are naturally drawn to within your spirit, within your physical life, that you, every step of the way, every layer of your life, everything that seems so random syncopates in a way to that it builds you up to this thing. And you can stand by and say, this is part of my personality, this is part of who I am. But you can also say that this is a stream of something that's been in my life the whole time. This is something that's with me. This is something that, in some ways, you can say that it's a hobby in the sense that you enjoy doing it. It's something that uplifts you. It's something that makes you feel inspired. You get a certain type of feeling when you inspire others with whatever this gift is, whatever this activity is. Um, this one is the simplest one to recognize because we're not including anything about your ancestry. We're not including anything about external impressions. It's basically what the natural inclination that was in your spirit when you incarnated in your physical body. Now, the exception to this is, of course, trauma, pain throughout life, where you find yourself doing something, maybe you're doing a career, but it's not aligned with your true essence of your spirit or your soul. But that doesn't necessarily take away a cultivation that you've had by going through the steps. I think it was a couple sessions ago we talked about you get the anointing or you get the jurisdiction by way of going through the process, walking each step of the pathway, going through the challenges and difficulties. There's a level of cultivation and initiation that's taken place. It's no longer theoretical, it's a tangible process. So, to sum it up, that is the first layer of the authority. It is your own soul and your own spirit.
Yes. So we're bringing this office of the authority of your soul and your spirit because a lot of the time, sometimes you might be doing things, engaging with things that are not actually aligned with your own personal jurisdiction. Sometimes people bring concepts of anointing and in the spirit, of course, right? So this whole concept of the authority of your soul is, as we've said, there is where it's your birthright, but there's also where you earn it and also where you inherit it. And this is where the bloodline will come in. You can inherit the authority to do something, right? And so we're bringing this up because let's return back to the topic. The topic is about protection, right? That when you align yourself with what your true authority is, what you were born with, birthright, what you earned through, your healing journey, through the initiation, the rites of passages that you have taken, when you align with what your people before you have cultivated and what they're now authorized to do in the spirit, what you are doing is that you are actually working within a structure that is so supportive to your own development and your own soul. And also, by virtue of it doing that, it protects you, doing what you were given the right by the divine, the supreme divine creator protects you. This is what we're saying is actually the one of the most ancient protection mechanism, right? Essentially, instead of trying to go be someone that you are not, every time you open doors to places that were never meant to be your places, to engage with cultivation of gifts that are not your gifts, cultivation of specific practices that are not aligned with your ancestry in any way, practices that are foreign, overall to your spirit, to your soul. What they do is that they take you out of the innate protection you have and they put you in a field that becomes a bit like a vulnerable space, because then you won't have those protection. Every gift has its own protection mechanism. Every bloodline has its own protectors, and they can only protect you if you work within the foundation, the structure that exists. Not things that you're making up, not things that you desire. Sometimes you can desire to be able to do something, but if it's not in your blood, it's not in your blood, it's not in your soul, it's not in your spirit. So going against that is what really begins to open the doors for theme 2, spiritual deception, to begin taking place. Just wanted to bring that back to that theme of the authority of the soul and the spirit, right? Okay. So I will do the second office, which is the authority that spiritual mentors, healers, essentially other human beings have, and why it's important for you to be aware of the authority that you are granting someone else, right? Who is typically like your priest, your pastor, your healer, whoever that healer is, anyone who is working in alignment with your soul and spirit, whether they're helping you, guiding you, they have authority, because whatever they say, including us right now, we have an authority right now that we're practicing with you. And there is a point of there's a point where your soul has agreed to receive this transmission, and you can use that transmission. But in this moment, as we're speaking to you, we're speaking in authority, in a certain right and jurisdiction. And you can observe that and notice that. But what now we're bringing into awareness is, did you realize before you came to the sanctuary that you were entering a relationship with joy and with this authority, and that you are agreeing to it, that you're agreeing that they will guide and teach me this concept of spiritual authority? That's one example, but it goes much deeper than that. It goes deeper, I guess, in the sense of whoever you believe in it is your priest, whoever you're working with as your priest, your pastor, whoever is essentially guiding and influencing your spirituality, your spiritual practices, your spiritual relationships with the divine, whether that they're doing that through teachings, through healing, through counsel, they are an authority in your life, and they are providing spiritual authority. And in that spiritual authority, there is where they're providing protection, right? So we'll start to say with ourselves in this example, because you are listening to us and have been listening to different transmission, the protection you have received is through the knowledge we have shared with some of you here, with everyone here today, you have been protected. There are certain places that and choices you could have made if you never encountered the concepts we're talking about that might have put you in a different and perhaps dangerous position. And then even now, there are some people who are course correcting as they're engaging with the teachings, right? And what you're doing is you're returning to a more protected space in your spirituality, in your spiritual journey, right? And so the relationships that you do have, the mentors, the healers that you are engaging with, are actually beings that you have put in a position. And that position is that I align myself with that authority, with that teachings, with whatever they're creating, and I'm engaging with it. And so, because of that, that's pretty important, which kind of then brings a little bit of like you can have a bit of shock when you start to think about how many times people are just engaging with people on the internet, including us. And there isn't a proper cross checking to see, do I actually truly align with what these people are saying? Is this helpful to me or is it harmful to me? Right? Are the way that I have taken joy and worth in what they teach as important to me, I have granted them authority to influence my soul and my soul's journey. Did I become aware that I was doing that? And in each choice, has this choice been helpful to me or I've not been able to see the fruits of that, right? And then this is why when you think about our modern society, it's a little kind of like, ooh, grim, because how many people are you listening to? And have you been listening to? That in one way or another have kind of shared and expressed that spiritual authority, and you have agreed to it by engaging with what they do. And then sometimes you don't actually really know these people. You haven't even really thought about it at the level that we're speaking of it today, right? The reason why this is important is because then you can understand why there's been so much chaos in the spiritual community in terms of spiritual deception, spiritual psychosis, why there's a lot of breakdowns and confusion where people have went through initiation processes and then they're taking that back because perhaps now they're understanding what they were agreeing to in terms of engaging with another human being and a human being who is in a spiritual leadership position, right? So this is definitely one of, I think, the most important thing to really kind of like ask yourself. And when we are kind of like moving forward in our journey and we want to purify this, the healthy thing that our ancestors and those who lived before us, what they used to do is they will really be very conscious of who they're choosing as a spiritual guide and leader. Most of the time, they will have at most 1 to 2 guides their entire lifetime. That this is my healer, this is my priest, this is my counselor. But our generation, you can have 5 different mentors and 10 different healers you go to. And what that does, you see how that's taking you out of your protection, because what that means is that you're working with too many hands, working on your soul. And sometimes most people don't even really cross-check if like you really align with the essence of that person and what that means, because the moment you enter that healing space, you are engaging with everything that they are, and you have consented to who they are, that essence, what they've agreed to, and as well as the authority that they are aligned to. One or another, it will impact you, right? So this is why this is so important in terms of like the human spiritual leaders that we are choosing for ourselves, and why that's a choice that we need to do more consciously in our journey. All right, so checking in, your thoughts on that one. I know that one is pretty big, but it's a very important conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we're moving on to Office 3. Office 3 is authority with non-human forces. This is where the angelic forces, the elemental forces, the ancestral forces step into play. This is where what is commonly known as your guides come in. Now, these non-human forces can be righteous or unrighteous, and each of these forces hold a particular spiritual authority. And with that spiritual authority, they have their own rules, they have their own ways that they operate, how they communicate, because they are still under an office as well that they have to follow and abide by those protocols that they're being given. Of course, fallen forces have their own agenda, which may include siphoning your essence, may include deceiving you. Righteous forces also have their own agenda, which includes self-empowering for yourself and bringing you to the kingdom of light, bringing healing, bringing purification and revelation for you. So with each of these forces that you could be assigned to or that you could earn by way of your own spiritual expansion and your own spiritual discipline, it's important to understand with their authority, there are certain things that they are in charge of, certain things that they have insight for, certain things that they are here to help you with. We spoke about this in a previous session that assuming that your guides are going to come and save you for everything is not the reality. And this is why spiritual authority. There are certain forces that are with you to advise you and help you when it comes to your family life, certain things that are connected to your finances. Maybe you have an ancestral force that is connecting you to the ways of your people and making sure things are done properly in a way that protects. Say, if you give birth to a new child, that following the ways of your people, making sure there's no contamination or no issues with the child's birth, as well as with the child's life. Knowing each one of those is you begin to see how this little map of spiritual authority comes into play because each guide will have a particular thing that they're there for. So the more you understand spiritual authority, the greater clarity you begin to have with who your guides are, what they're there for, what's the purpose. So you're not just walking in the dark, as many people say, I don't know my guides, I don't know what they're here for, if they're there, if they're supporting me, I don't feel it. This is even true with angelic forces where someone may feel something happened to them, either they got into a car accident or they didn't get the job that they wanted, and turning to either just God or saying the Holy Spirit versus understanding how your unique angelic forces work and how they connect back to your personal life. Certain angelic forces are there for certain things. Certain ones are there to inspire you, to open up doors. Once that door is open, it may be left back up to you or left up to you to continue to cultivate, to connect to another energy. This is not to say that every angelic force is going to viscerally present itself to you, but what we are giving you is the spiritual mechanics, which is essentially spiritual authority, to begin to create a map in your mind on how angelic forces work, elemental forces work, even for examples of if you have ancestral gifts that connect to elemental forces like water. Say you have a gift of prophecy that connects to using water to read and to prophesy. There's definitely an elemental force that has moved through the lineage to assist those gifted individuals. There's a level of your own training, there's a level of you connecting to that force. But both of them are important. There are certain rules that that elemental force follows on how they communicate, what they say, what they don't say, making sure they don't overstep their bounds. This is even true in the extremes of negative forces. When Joy and I are dealing with holy combat for the clients that come to us that are being suppressed and oppressed, the same laws apply. There's a fallen force trying to claim jurisdiction over a person's finances or lack thereof. claiming jurisdiction over their love life, claiming jurisdiction over the well-being of their soul. And they're going essentially saying, this is what my orders are. This is what I have access to. This person did A, B, and C. They created a contract with me. This allows me to go and enter into this door to do this. I'm allowed to do this. So all of this is the whole world of understanding some of the mechanics behind spiritual warfare, some of the mechanics of why it seems like your prayers aren't being heard, why your potlas aren't being heard, why your ancestors aren't showing up, why your angelic forces aren't showing up, lack thereof, is because most people don't understand spiritual authority, particularly in this case, the spiritual authority that their guides have that are around them, and how it's supposed to be used, how you're supposed to communicate in a proper way and fashion.
Yeah, I think that our theme last month of spiritual deception was connected to this, the non-human forces the most, because there are so many entities claiming authority over human beings. And this has been the crisis of our generation, right? But all this to say that when you begin to kind of see these authorities that exist, the authority of your soul, your spirit, the authority that you are giving to spiritual leaders and mentors, and the spiritual authority that you're giving to non-human forces. But the point of all this is not to say don't give any authority to any human being or to any forces. Is to just consciously participate in that process of choosing who you are giving your authority to and for what purpose. And as usual, we are always saying and encouraging you to look at the fruits of what that partnership is doing, whether it's with a human being or with a non-human being. All right. So the last office is the authority with the creator. We spoke about this briefly at the very beginning, but it's really one of the most important thing. And this is why for us, our work is always to redirect you to this, because this is the highest authority, right? So I'm going to break this down a bit for those people. I don't know how many people here grew up or come from a background of Christianity, because I'm going to use that as an example. In Christianity, it is believed, and I'm talking about like traditional Christianity. Yes. It's believed that the highest authority of that spiritual system is Christ, and that authority has incarnated through the man known as Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach originally, and that in your spiritual journey, when you are navigating different experiences, by aligning yourself, essentially being born again, and essentially aligning yourself with the authority of the Christ, you are coming under the jurisdiction and the protection of the Christ force, the Christ spirit. Right? And this is very real for billions of people around the world, which is why we can never dismiss it. Right? And not only that, by declaring, using the logo of Christ in the spirit realm, you can claim protection, and you can receive protection because you are claiming and you are reiterating and reconfirming that you are under the authority of Christ. So this is the whole concept of in the name of Jesus Christ. That is an actual spiritual mechanic that people use around the world, except that for Christianity, it's the Christ, the name. And if we go breaking it down more on the specific science behind it, essentially you are aligning your frequency, the frequency of your soul, with the frequency of the Spirit of Christ, which exists in the spirit realm, particularly in the etheric, in the astral realm. It's all around us, that spirit. And so when you say my frequency is aligning with the frequency that is known as Christ, that is what the in the name of the Christ is about. And when you do that, claiming that authority, which is not you, right? But it's an authority outside you, external to you, that is considered to have a specific authority. That authority does protect your soul, your spirit. And many people have shared that when I declared and I was in spiritual warfare and I called Jesus, all the demons left. Did they lie? Nah, they didn't lie, because the spirit of Christ has an authority. But so does, just so we understand, so does the spirit of the Chetaure, so does the spirit of Yahweh, so does the spirit of Elohim, right? So does the spirit of Zeus and Hades. You see, I'm talking about different gods and deities of Isis. They all have authority, right? And each one of us, we're choosing which authority we're aligning with, and specific different people around the world are aligned with specific authorities, right? And each one of us, we're saying this is the highest authority. And usually those authorities will protect those who are under them, who are in agreement with them, right? But as usual, we're always asking, but what's the agreement? You need to know what the agreement is, right? But overall, the highest authority in our planet is with the Creator. And that is the creator of the human race and the human species. And if you are a human being and you are in this room, that is who the highest authority is. And through aligning with that highest authority, which we call God, Mudimu, Ngulukulu, many different names, when you align yourself with that authority, it will protect you, which is why every one of us were here today. It is, I love the way that sometimes this authority is called the Lord of Life, right? The being who controls life itself, right? That means it allows us to be here, to be alive, to survive the things we have survived in our lives. But sometimes we don't understand, how did I come out of that? And it's because there was a divine force impulse behind it that protected you. You look at certain situation and you're like, how did I come out alive? I should have died, right? How many people have that story, that moment in their life where you're like, I honestly don't know how I came out of it. And that was because the authority that is the creator of your soul, your spirit, took over whatever that situation, that experience was, and it protected you and took you out of whatever that situation was. And what does that mean? It authorship, your life. It rewrote your life. If you were meant to die. And for me, this is so personal because I have seen real authority in my life, right? Where I had near-death experiences and I was like, it could have only been the creator of my soul, my spirit that took me out, because I, as Joy, did not have authority here. And my spirit didn't. And I'm not sure if my ancestors did, but only the Lord of Life, the supreme creator, the divine, the ineffable one, is the only one who wrote this story, because this chapter shifted in ways that I couldn't have possibly came up with. Right? So that's why spiritual authority is so important and it matters. And when we talk about reverence and devotion, when we do that to the highest authority in our life, we are doing that because we are essentially granting the supreme divine to author certain parts of our lives that we couldn't have possibly seen coming. We wouldn't even have the authority to really immediately in the moment shift what needs to be shifted, survive whatever the situation was. Right? So that's the whole concept of why mankind worships, comes into reverence, is devoted, is because we all could not ignore that there is something else higher than our soul, our spirit, that is writing the stories of our lives. And ignoring it is a little bit of like foolishness, right? Which is why if you are spiritually inclined, you have to get very clear about who that is, that highest authority, right? And aligning yourself with that. And this is important because I think a lot of people forget this highest authority, or they're not clear about it. And there could be seasons where we go through that where we're like, I really don't know. I'm still figuring that out. I'm still trying to understand God. I'm trying to decolonize God from religion and religious trauma. And that's definitely a rite of passage for many people, maybe for you if you're in this room, right? And you're confused. And even when we do say God, it's like, which God am I talking about? Is it Yahweh or is it Elohim? Is there even a difference? Is it Jesus? What name do I use for that? And that's the endeavor that we're all in, right? And in that endeavor, it matters that we begin to move into it with that consciousness, with that awareness, because it does influence our entire spiritual path and entire spiritual journey overall.
Yes, I agree. I'll add a couple of things, Joy. Um, if there's only one connection of spiritual authority, the true living God, your creator, is the most important one because that is essentially like working for the company, knowing the CEO, the owner of the all the operations, all the spiritual authority offices that could come through and save you for certain things. You're going directly to the main person, and then that person will contact the correct offices to assist and help you. It may take time for a person to correctly and accurately communicate with their creator, to communicate with God, to where you can hear the response back. Sometimes it is through different offices of God, but with spiritual cultivation and consistency, you can have moments to where you hear clear signals, messages of what you're being told. Now, the execution of things manifesting, that is where spiritual authority comes in because unfortunately, people who say they're making a clear connection to God and they just pray to God and say, everything is going to be solved, bring this in my life, I need help with this. The fault is where people pray to God and then offices of God are authorities, including us, Joy and myself. We are under the dominion of God's supreme kingdom. And sometimes when you pray for certain things, people are being brought to you to execute what you ask for. So in our generation, for me growing up as a Christian, the mindset was we prayed to God, we prayed to Jesus, it's done. But then you have someone come in and they try to, there's an opportunity for you to work with something. An office of God is given to you to create what you perceive as a problem, but it's an actual challenge for you to go through an initiation. And instead of you noticing that, you go back, I'm praying to God. It's like the analogy of the person that's stuck in the ocean, praying to God to come and save them. And a boat comes by, a small little paddle boat, and the person says, no, I'm waiting for God to come and save me. And the person's like, are you sure? And they said, yes. And then a large whale comes by and it sits there to where the person could hop on top of the whale. And then they're like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. So the person dies, they go up to heaven and ask God, and God says, I sent you the paddle boat, I sent you the well. So it's important with our authority to God to realize that even though you're communicating directly to God, that doesn't mean that all the other spiritual authorities and offices don't exist and they are not actively playing their role. The same way, as I said, in a company, you want to go directly to the CEO about your pay stub being incorrect. You know you need to go to the accounting department. You can't go to the CEO. They have too many other things going on to try to focus on that. They may say hi and give you a smile, but then they'll direct you to the correct office that's going to um, help you. Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to add.
Yeah, definitely. This whole conversation of spiritual authority is kind of recognizing when one, you as a soul, a spirit, where you are, the authority that you have has reached its upper limit. And essentially, I honestly cannot help myself in this situation, right? And so the next authority, you can go directly to God and you'll be redirected back to the human being, the human mentor, the human leader, the human healer who can help you with your situation, or you can be redirected to the non-human forces, your angelic forces, and otherwise that will also help you in your situation. But it's not as straightforward like you're always just doing direct backflow return to God and the answer and the support will always come back directly like that. It's always moving through these four offices. Sometimes the answer goes directly to your spirit and your spirit tells you what the solution is and you act on it. And sometimes it redirects you to go to your spiritual healer to help you with this, or leader or priest or pastor. They will help you with this. Or the angelic forces that you work with will help you with this, right? So we were breaking down those four offices to just show them as they exist so that you can also see that the solutions in your life, the way that your life will be authored, written, created, will be moving between these four offices. What God decrees and authors, what the angelic forces decrees, the higher forces decrees, and what the spiritual leaders, guides are helping you co-create and decree, as well as what your soul is also decreeing and commanding. Right. So conscious, spiritually inclined individual recognizes all these and learns to use all these four offices consciously, deliberately, intentionally. Right. You have to know where you don't need to be taking a choice and putting that authority on the human being who's not you. Right? When it's a time for you to ask counsel with your soul, let your soul be the one who's the authority. Right? And other times, let other higher forces be the authority on what needs to be done. Because unfortunately, as much as we would like to, life on earth is co-created and at different levels. That is so frustrating for the human personality because we don't always see all the layers. Like, you may not see why you had to be in this room today, but the good news is that you listened to your soul that inspired you to come to the sanctuary for whatever reason, which you may know today why it was necessary that you be here, or you may later see it. And maybe you will never even see it, but it will also come together sometime in your life why you were here in this room, right? It will make sense, at least to your soul, right? So this is overall why spiritual authority is really important and is part of your protection. Instead of just us opening doors that we feel like, we have to spend a lot of time getting to know ourselves, our souls, our spirit. We have to understand our bloodlines, what we have inherited. And we also have to understand the initiation path that our soul has put us on. Because a lot of the challenges that you are facing is because your soul is initiating into something. And through that initiation, you are earning a logo. You are earning, whether you are earning courage, you are earning confidence. And each time you earn that, your authority expands within that logo. And you will be able to create more and impact more people as well. And so overall, this is for us one of the most important things. And it's honestly kind of purifying because what we're hoping to give is a system. Instead of you just like running around in the spiritual realm and just touching everything that is being presented to you and engaging and going to, into the famous spaces and leaders and mentors just because that's what everyone said, instead of really listening to what your spirit says needs to happen. You can just kind of cut that whole decision making in half by just letting spiritual authority lead you, like your highest authority, being very clear about that, and let that trickle down to, okay, if the highest authority I believe in is God, the creator of my soul, then the forces that I will work with based on what I know my soul to be are these and this and these. Right? It's almost like mathematics to me anyway, which is why I think it's like, yeah, really cool to understand these concepts so that we are not lost. And the more we can engage with spiritual authority in this way, for us in our work in Holy Combat, in Revival, a lot of the time, these are the gaps we're seeing. This is why we're having this conversation, because we're like, I think we are having these clients come in because they didn't understand spiritual authority. So they just thought it doesn't have implications or impact in their life. And now we have to unravel that. And so that's why we are doing this, is because I think we get so frustrated with what's happening in the community. And each time we go back, especially the young community, the young generation, my God, it's becoming more chaotic. There I was having conversation with my little cousin, and I was like, ooh, there is so much work to do. Like, it's everyone is doing whatever they want, however way that they want. And it's just, yeah, we are going to have a whole lot of mess to clean up in the coming years, because of we have kind of like let go of things that have always been known by the ancients and the generations before us. And we're just kind of like, we think we can restart, and like there's literally nothing new under the sun. We're all working within the same. These laws, they don't change. Spiritual authority has always been known. It is what formed a lot of religious systems, and it's not going to change anytime soon. So, yeah. All right.
Do you want to break down choosing your spiritual foundation?
Oh, that's what we're doing now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so all this to say that this is why, if you've been in our space with these teachings that we've been bringing forward, this body of work of Holy Combat, one of the topics we talk about at length is spiritual foundation. And this is how you can get very clear on what your spiritual foundation is, and align what you are doing with the authorities, the authority of your soul, of your spiritual mentors, of your spiritual forces, and of your creator, the highest authority. All right. So, a question to kind of contemplate. I think that maybe as you guys have been doing this work, this may not apply to you now, but it's just something again to purify if it does. It's essentially, out of these four offices we're talking about, which office, whether it's your own soul, gifts, and mentor, and non-human force, or God, do you now realize that you've never actually asked permission to engage with, to enter, to relate to? Right. And also, just overall, which of these offices, like your gifts, your mentor, non-human forces, or God, definitely need a review in your spiritual foundation, like what you have been calling your spiritual practice overall. Right? And so, yeah, those are things you can contemplate. Overall, our message today is about understanding your innate authority, right? So the authority of your soul, of your lineage, the authority that you are aligned with, whether it's through mentorship and leaders and healers, right? And the lineages that you are part of, right? The authority of the forces that you work with, the authority of God. Let that be kind of like a map, and a map that you use as you're navigating your spiritual journey, right? How you move, what you need to do, where you need to go, right? Like, our spiritual journeys can become much more simpler than they may have been if we really get down to, okay, these are the authority that I am aligned with. Because you know what that does? Once you have consciously decided that this is the highest authority I work with, which is a journey to arrive to that choice. But once you do that, then you don't have to make up which laws you need to align with and which one you don't. Like you can just essentially enter whatever that relationship looks like and honor the laws, the logos, the spiritual orders that exist within that authority, that relationship. And this liberates you because your soul has a structure it can work with instead of so many structures, because you have too many authorities in the room, too many forces you're working with that is actually confusing your soul, and that's what's stalling your evolution, your expression, your spiritual journey overall. And also you will begin to spend less money with the healers trying to fix things. Now you can actually focus on what you want to do, which is actual true development of your soul and spirit, and growing and creating and authoring your life, right? Without all that confusion, right? Because you're clear. I think that actually most people, if you are in this room, you probably really will thrive within this kind of structure that we're introducing. Because I think not having structure for a long time can feel a little like you're going round and round, and it's kind of like, yeah, it can make you mad a little, take you off balance, right? So this is why we were talking about spiritual authority today.
Yes, absolutely. Spiritual authority, as I said earlier, helps you create a map of understanding how to communicate. When you sit down and you pray, you understand what are the guidelines for my prayer? What is the intent? What is the purpose of me praying? What is this supposed to do? What is the response that I'm supposed to be looking for when I pray? How am I going to receive a response? You understand spiritual authority protocols, it's easier to navigate that versus just praying because you saw someone else do it, praying because the pastor told you to, praying because that's just what we do, but you don't have an understanding of the mechanics, the details, the subtleties of what you should be looking for, what you should be open to when you're praying to God and asking for support. How is that support going to show up? Is it going to, when you're asking for an answer, is it going to show up through a dream? Is it going to show up through a vision? When you're trying to get clarity for jobs, all of that matters. And spiritual authority is the key component to all of it, as well as your protection of understanding why you feel like you're being spiritually attacked. If you can look back and say, well, I recently started this new spiritual practice. I guess this practice might, now that I do more research, it might be connected to some deities or gods that I'm not aware of. This could be part of the reason why it seems like whatever protection I had before when everything was okay, it's now. So all of this that we're explaining to you is helping you create a very tangible map on how to conduct your spiritual life for your own spiritual well-being and cultivation.
Mm, definitely. And yeah, it really makes the path much, much more easier. Right. Right. So I saw a couple of questions here about, but how do you know which God, and that's a very fair and very important question. And we're going to be talking about it actually next session. We're going to be talking about the God wound and why a lot of the problems that we're seeing on this world are connected to that. First of all, to that question of which God, and how do I know? How do I know it's the voice of God and not the voice of, say, the divine forces and counsel, or even just a false being pretending to be God? How do I differentiate that? Because what we're talking about is that, yeah, we have a wound that is connected to our conscious separation from God, where the soul has been separated from God, and accessing that is not easy, right? But that's, I think, is at the core of why we wake up, like have a spiritual awakening in the first place, is because many of us were asking that question. A lot of the time we do it privately because it's almost seen as if, like, how dare you say that? Or most importantly, people act as if you're supposed to actually really know already what God sounds like, when for you, you've never experienced it. Right. So that's definitely what we're going to be breaking down as part of spiritual authority, because we have said that the highest authority is God. But we have to be honest and say, but which God? Which God are we talking about? The truth is that obviously we cannot answer that question in just one session, but we will bring that and consolidate the best discernment training that we can do to help you kind of like navigate that question. But I think at the core of it, it's the whole entire spiritual journey that we're all in, is to actually have a very healthy, conscious, and direct relationship with our Creator. And a lot of the time, for most of us, we have to first take out everything that is not God from our inner temple, our inner kingdom, to even begin having that actual relationship. And this is what most of you have been in, all that confusion that has happened in the spiritual journey, listening to so many doctrines and scriptures and ideologies. What it does is just to keep adding more and more confusion to what your creator is and the actual healthy conscious relationship that is supposed to happen in that relationship is not always clear, because there's so many rules, there's so many systems that tell us how it's supposed to look like. And we often can feel that oppression when our soul is like, this is not it for me, something is off here, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about under the theme of spiritual authority. That's going to be the last topic this month, 2 weeks from now. So you can join us and we will break that down even more. In terms of the work that we do in Holy Combat and Revival, and the work that we'll continue to do, at the core of it for us, it's always to help people cultivate a healthy, conscious relationship with the Supreme Divine, the Creator, right? And to make that a very personal and intimate thing, right? And using tools that begin to kind of like unravel everything that's false about that relationship that you have with God, so that the pure one can happen. And to be honest, what we have seen is that it takes time, but those who become committed to this, they see the breakthrough. And even here in the chat, there's a testimony here about joining Holy Combat and 5 months later being pain free, which is so major. That is so major. And we're so happy to hear that, because I think it's because you have started to remove everything else that was kind of separating you from the divine and coming closer, because disease is always a reflection of where we are. There is a certain level of disconnection that is happening at the soul, where we are maybe our soul life is being oppressed in one or another. And once we begin to heal that, then the disease clears, the illness, the pain clears, because we are now more aligned with the soul. So yes, that's definitely what we are going to be talking about next.
Yes,
Next story, yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will commune with you all next week.